Terri, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Pray podcast today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Can you give myself and the audience a little bit of background about who you are and what you do?
Okay, my name's Terri Proctor. I am the founder of a nonprofit called Stop Elderly Scams. And 3 years ago, I was kind of thrown into the situation by my elderly mother who loves social media. She was going on Facebook and posting all these nice little, sayings and everything, and to her friends. And then all of a sudden, we hear about an oil rig boyfriend.
Mm.
And we're like, what is happening? I thought there were just friends on there. So for some reason, then she was sending like gift cards for like a birthday present of $300. And when I grew up with my mother, I would get like a $20 check from my mother, maybe $50 at Christmas time. So it was like a red flag to me when I heard $300 for someone's birthday. And we kept hearing stories, and she was open to it, talking about this person, James, and how he wanted to marry her and all these things. And it was just hard to understand. We thought it was going to pass. And she did get upset with that person for whatever reason. But then another oil rigger
Mm.
popped up named Michael Smith. The names are always very common. And this one got really serious, and she lost, I would say, probably $100,000 to this
Oh.
person in a year. And during that time, like I was going to different places trying to find an answer. What should I do? And I kept getting advice, and I would go maybe to the police force, and they said, they would tell me stories about how they had dealt with it, and said there was really nothing they could do. And I talked to friends, family, and you always get advice. But the one thing I kept hearing was, she's a willing participant. And instead of it being that she was a victim of a crime, which she is to me. And so I tried to go along with it. And I think in the beginning, I didn't handle it as well as I should, because I really didn't understand it. And I was angry and I was frustrated with my mother. And instead of trying to maybe listen and reason, I went down a different route. And I guess about a year and a half in, I decided to change my outlook toward her. And it didn't really help, but but we're going on 3 years now that she's been doing this. And one might disappear, but then another one will always pop up. So I feel like they're all, it's like a boiler room or something where they're all cold calling, texting all day, these people. And my mother's case, she was very lonely. She lives by herself. She's a widow in a single family home. So her fun was going on Facebook. And, I think she started looking forward to, the text she would get from them. And, that was her day. And, they would get call her babe and honey and tell her they love her and all these things, And it's hard for friends and family, if you're working, to give that attention to
Yeah.
someone. And she was getting it like all day long. And she wakes up looking forward to it.
Mm.
So that's how I started. And here I am.
So I know one of the things that I often hear from people is that people are targeted during specifically emotional times in their life where a spouse passes away, there's an illness that happens, or a friend passes away. Was there any of that happening in her life, or was just this just kind of she just met people online?
It was, my father had passed away probably 6 years before. But as she's gotten older, a lot of friends have passed away. And she does talk about that a lot. And I think they offered her like a new life, saying, I'm going to marry you. I have children. We're going to have a family together. So it was this fantasy, of I'll be with a family again. I won't be lonely. And, to anyone, I think that would look good. And she does have cognitive decline. So she's a little more gullible to things. And I think in her generation, she's in her 80s, you trusted people. You didn't think people were out to harm you in any way. And, I heard stories. She would tell me that I didn't realize this, but they would say they needed a flight home, but she would go buy an Apple gift card. And
Yeah.
I go, but Apple gift cards do not purchase airline tickets. And she still won't believe me on those things. And the links she would go to, like she put $10,000 in cash in the middle of a magazine and mailed that
Oh.
somewhere in the US. So, they're very good at manipulating. And it continues on, it's a big fight, honestly, that I'm still doing today.
That's challenging that you're kind of still in the midst of it. It's still fresh in your mind. This is not a we finally got it resolved. The bad guy's in jail,
Right.
and mom's doing great, but she's still in the middle of this.
Yes, yes. I mean, I just had to go and visit her because they were trying to talk her into taking out a $7,000 personal loan. And she had already taken out three of them in the past year. And that's another frustration, that why would you give an elderly woman a loan with 40% interest rate?
Oh,
So, yeah. And then two of them, one had 60%, another had 70% interest rate. So you're always like dodging all these different people taking advantage. So, um, but yeah, it's still going on. And one of the reasons, I would read stories online and I would look at the comments that people would say about the people that were scammed. And it was so sad to me because they would go on about how stupid and dumb they were for being taken. And I'm like, but it's hard to know the situation someone's in,
yeah.
when they don't have a lot of people to talk to. And here's someone telling them things, they want to believe it. So,
Yeah, and a lot of these things are, it's not like someone showed up their front door and said, "Hey, give me $10,000."
right.
Those are easy to recognize. This is something that has been built up. Well, I've known this person for months, or I've known them for a year. Of
Yes.
course, I would help a friend out, wouldn't you?
Yes, exactly. And even though they will never FaceTime the person, and I'm like, isn't that odd to you that you've never seen this person? Because even growing up, it was don't talk to
Yeah.
strangers. And here you are, you're involved with someone you've never seen before and you're believing everything they say. And the latest one, I don't know, somehow they're generals now in the US Army. And it's really sad that this person would say, "Oh, I'm going to come to your house." And he would promise. And at one point, she made dinner. She made a
Oh,
huge amount of spaghetti. And because him and his two children were coming, she told the neighbor about it. She put makeup on, she got all dressed up. And they just play these games with her on a daily basis.
oh.
And, it's really sad. And, with Stop Elderly Scams, I'm hoping, to get the word out there so that people will talk about it.
Mhm.
Because I feel like, people get embarrassed that they're taken advantage of. And, I've had people email me and I say, just talk to your parents about it and maybe let them be advocates, for others and say,
Yeah.
this is what happened to me, so that they feel like they're doing something instead of being scammed.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's one of the big challenges is the embarrassment and the shame that people feel once
yeah,
they if they do realize that it was if or when they realize that it's a scam, that they don't want to say anything about it because they feel ashamed about what happened, or like, oh gosh, I can't believe that I did this.
no, I
But
agree.
that lack of discussion, like that conversation could save other people from the same fate.
Yes, yes. And I started researching the statistics, and they say like people over 60 in 2023, they estimate they lost $3.4 billion.
Oh,
And imagine that's an estimation because a lot of people don't talk about it.
it's got to be a
So
lot higher than that,
that's what I
unfortunately.
think as well. Yeah. And I also think about, the elderly people that I read stories where they lose their life savings. Are they now having to go on Medicaid? And how is it affecting our country because of that? So it's a big, it's a situation that somehow needs to be addressed. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping we figure something out in the future.
I think it's one of those things that we're still in the process of trying to figure out how do we prevent this? How do we minimize it? How do we reduce it? How do we have an impact in this space?
Yes. No, I agree. I agree.
Earlier on, you said you had tried one particular route of interaction with your mom and that didn't work, and so you pivoted to something else. What was it that you were trying that didn't work?
That didn't work. I think it was the anger and frustration I had. And I was projecting it to her because in my mind, I'm like, why can't you see what everyone else is seeing? Because I mean, the banks, she went through 5 different banks that she was kicked out of because they don't want the liability.
Yeah.
Um, Friends, family, people stopped talking to her, neighbors. And it's just hard to understand that. So what I'm trying to do now is just to listen and try and reason. And sometimes it just doesn't work. And I mean, she came to me a couple of weeks ago saying that she was going to go withdraw $2,000 because she was buying an investment property with this person that she'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And that day I was just like, okay, you know, I I just didn't want to fight with her about it because the desperation sometimes is so overwhelming for her that she gets a lot of anxiety and she has to do it. So I think if you can take out the anger and the frustration, it helps. It really helps the relationship with the family or friend that is going through that.
And I think the scammers know that that's one of those things that family and friends potentially respond with, and they use that to further isolate and to further manipulate the person.
Yes, and I've actually seen their texts, talking badly about me, the scammers, to my mother. So I do understand what's going on. And that's why, I try to remain positive, but it's not always so easy because, you don't want your loved one to be taken advantage of all the
Yeah.
time. So, but, some neighbors are very willing to, stand by her, and then others they just don't want a part of it anymore. So
Yeah.
it's kind of sad.
And that that unfortunately makes it even worse because the more isolated the person gets,
Right.
the more manipulated they can be, and the less awareness from the outside of what's really going on in their life.
Yes, yes. And I have to admit, there is one financial institution that hasn't kicked her out. And I mean, they're very frustrated, but they've been understanding and, because they understand what's going on. And I even was at a grocery store the last time I went to see my mother, and the manager had caught on to her coming in to buy gift cards and would not allow her to buy gift cards there anymore.
Way to go, manager.
Right? You don't hear that. So I went in and I went to thank the woman, and she said she's not the only one that comes in here doing that. And I always say to them, if you received it from a text or an email to come get this gift card, you cannot buy it here. And she told me she calls other stores, letting them know that this person might come in looking to buy gift cards.
Yeah,
So there are some people that are onto it and are looking out for people.
I've heard that convenience stores and across the street and nearby retirement homes
Right.
specifically, like the people at the counter have been trained to ask questions
Yes.
about people people from the retirement home coming in and wanting to buy gift cards. Okay,
Yes.
who did someone tell you to buy this gift card? Who was it? How do you know them? And the scammers will often tell them to lie and
Right.
say other things. But it's encouraging to hear that there's somebody at a local store saying, "I see that there's a problem. You know I'm going to do something that's not necessarily in my store's best interest,
Right.
um,
Right.
but I know it's in the interest of society that I help. I'm sorry, I can't activate this card today. I don't know what's going on."
Right. No, it's hard to find people like that. And when you do, you're like, wow, that's a positive thing that happened to me today.
Yeah, that's really challenging. Um, I kind of wonder of you know how much of this is a result of kind of isolation, and how can we as children and grandchildren help our families members not be isolated, to see if that kind of helps reduce it.
I mean, I was hoping at this point in her life that she might be consider like an independent living
Hmm.
because I think the thing is, she lives in a single family home by herself. She can no longer drive. So it's not like she can go out and see people.
Yeah,
And I myself, I live in a high rise, in a city. And if I go in the elevator, I see people.
yeah,
So I don't get lonely, but she's keeps thinking these people are going to come. So she's so much against going to a place, where she could sit and play cards or play games of some sort. And it is hard for family and friends to be around all the time,
yeah.
because they're working and they have other things going on. So it's just, I think I even thought about hiring someone to text her every day, you know, like a dog sitter or something,
That's
just to give
that
her attention.
that's a really interesting service to that would be an interesting service to offer of,
Right?
we yeah, you got to do really good background checks on those people, but
Oh, that's true.
you
So,
know, we will check in on your relatives and interact with them and be their friend.
yes, yes, because there's so many people that need that. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
So I see a challenge like at some point I think hey, we need to talk to our parents and our grandparents about these possibilities of what these things could be. But I'd like to say, like, what can the elderly do to protect themselves? But I think
right.
once it gets past a certain point, I don't know. I don't know that that's possible in a sense.
No, I agree. I agree. And I mean, that's not the only scam that she's been involved in. There was like one of those prize scams where she was going to win $1 million, and they sent her these fake checks. And I saw a picture of the checks, and they look very real to me. And she took them to the bank to try and cash $10,000 worth of checks, and I had alerted the bank to
Mhm.
let them know what was going on, so they didn't cash them. So there's just so many different things going on, as far as scams, that it's hard to keep up and it's hard to advise people on a daily basis of what's out there. So,
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to ask you about, without revealing the name of the financial institution, because I don't know that's necessarily appropriate. You said there was one bank that has been, that they haven't kicked her out, that it sounds like they're working with you to help her. Is it just because it's a branch manager that is understanding, or like how has that developed? Because I think that's really interesting that you have a bank that's really trying to help, that's doing what it can to help her out and working with you in the same time.
I think that they take a different attitude than the other banks. They want their customers and they want to protect them. And and you're right, they are working with me, and trying to help out because it's a hard situation. She gets kicked out of a bank and you had to start all over with the online banking, the debit cards and everything. And I've sat down with them and like I said, if I know that some type of scam is going to happen, I let them know. And no, they've been very nice, I have to say.
That's really good. I think I've told this story once or twice on the podcast, and I'll tell it again. And if I've told it too many times, people will let me know. Um, my wife is not from the U.S., and so culturally, you help support family, and you send money to family once in a while. And the local bank that I had been using didn't support international fund transfers, which was kind of interesting. That maybe that's a route to go. um, and so I had to open up an account with one of the big banks that I knew would have the international transferability. And so I went in, deposited some money, made sure you got to. No bank will ever let you wire money out within seconds of it showing up. So I let it sit there for a week and then wired most of it overseas. And the next day I got a call from the bank saying, "Hey, this is so and so with the bank. I've got a couple questions about your wire transfer. Who are you sending the money to? Why are you sending it? Are you sure that you're really talking to that person?" Like I was really amazed. Like I was both annoyed and encouraged at the same time. It was, a lot of friction, and it was annoying to have the conversation. But the podcast host, Chris Parker, was going, "Oh, this is awesome. Like this bank is actually
Concerned.
the the behavior had all the warning signs of somebody being scammed, and so it was really neat to see them do everything that they could. As well, are you sure that it's this? Are you sure that it's not someone else pretending to be the individual? Have you met them in person? Do you know for sure that you're actually dealing with them? How are you communicating with them?" It was really neat to see how far they went above and beyond to try to prevent what appeared, and rightly so, appeared to be a scam on their part. But
Yeah.
it sounds like, unfortunately, your mom has not had the best luck with banks, or
I
they
mean,
just like, we're going to wash our hands, we're going to close the account, and we don't even want to risk this.
she did have her money invested, and I have to say that her financial advisor, he tried his best. And they even put like something on her account, an alert saying that she was being scammed. And they would not let her take out large amounts. But I'm assuming that she was coached and told to keep calling and to call his boss. And she kept doing it until finally they said, okay, take your money out. And as soon as she did that, that's when she lost the large amount of money
Yeah.
because, they could no longer help us and oversee it. So, and the local bank she was working with, I have to say, it's a small bank. And I think that that's part of it because
Mhm.
sometimes bigger banks, they don't have the capacity to like look after everyone's account like that. So,
And a local bank has that person. Their business operates differently. They have a personal touch with what they do, as opposed to, we're just this gigantic financial institution and here's the rules.
right,
The,
right.
the, the little bank, they want to know who their customers are. They want to have that relationship with them.
No, I agree. I agree.
So what are some of the things you think that we can do to kind of help our parents and grandparents, but not in a way that doesn't kind of take away their independence or challenge their independence? Because I hear that over and over again from people of like, well, as soon as mom thought I was trying to put her in a facility or to take over her bank accounts, that was the tripping point for the scammer to really start taking advantage of her, because then she's like, "Ah, see,
Yeah.
this is proof that what Bob said is true. You really don't love me. You really don't trust me."
And I've heard that. You're trying to control me. You're trying to take away all my freedom. And I guess it's just start having conversations, telling stories of other people that are being scammed. So if they think something's off, then maybe they'll come to you
Hmm.
instead of being afraid to talk about it. Because I think even us, if something happens and we're embarrassed about it, we don't want to tell people.
Yeah.
So imagine you're getting older and you kind of know that maybe your mind's not all there and people will judge you in a certain way. So I think just having it as part of the conversation, saying, look at this person, this happened to them, because it's out there. It's going to happen to everyone, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, mom, I saw this. Hey, dad, I saw this news
yeah,
story about this situation. Gosh,
yeah,
isn't that crazy?
yes, I
Or isn't,
agree.
isn't that sad? And
Yeah, something like that, I think, because there's plenty of stories to tell. So
Yeah. So is that something that you're doing with Stop Elderly Scams? Is just trying to tell people stories, or are you trying to change the legislation? What is it that the approach that you're taking?
I just started, I launched my website, stopelderlyscams.com, in March. And what I'm really trying to do is educate and communicate. And basically, I have a newsletter. I tell different stories every month of my experience.
Hmm.
Or I've had people like email me their experiences, with dating sites, different things, just to make people, I want people to feel free to talk about it
Yeah.
and, to come to me. And I'm hoping in the future, when my nonprofit gets very large, that I'll be able to give back to some of these people because they lose their life savings.
Yeah.
Maybe $20,000 was all they had. And I'd love to be able to help those people, get back on their feet. So,
That's a great approach. I mean, I'm super proud and I'm super excited when I hear people like, I want to make a difference. I want to figure
yeah,
a way to intervene, and it's not just about you and your mom,
right.
but how can I help this from happening? How can I help prevent this from happening to other
Yes.
people and raise awareness? And that's the reason the podcast exists
Yes.
is to raise awareness. And I don't necessarily expect your mom to be listening to the podcast.
No.
But I think it's for those of us who our parents are aging that we need to be aware of these things and start talking about it
Yes.
in a way that's not threatening to them and not taking away their independence.
Yes.
I
There's a fine line there. So,
I remember when my grandfather got to the point where he couldn't drive anymore. They still had the car and it was still there, and he hadn't he knew he wasn't supposed to drive, but at some point he had some cognitive decline
yes.
and got it in his mind that he needed to go move the car. And he
Okay.
went out and did move the car, and nothing happened. But we were like, okay, so how do we get the car key off of his keychain
Right.
without him knowing? Or how do we I remember this discussion on, in my mind, I seem to remember this happening around Christmas of like, well, can we get the keychain off? Can we, like, he always had a pocket knife on his keychain. Can we ask to use his pocket knife and take the key and take the car key away? And we're like, well, but he knows the car key is there or not there.
Right.
So can we replace it with a different key? Can we file something down on the key so the car won't start?
Right. Right.
Because it's like we didn't want it to, we knew it wasn't safe for him to drive, but we
Yeah.
didn't also, but on the other side, we didn't want to cause him distress at the same time. And like, okay, it's a challenging process to try to figure out.
Yes. No, I went through that too. And the thing that finally helped, my mother went to a neurologist and they sent her to a simulator to drive. And in the simulator, she actually hit a police car.
Oh no.
So she realized maybe it's time I stopped driving. So, but
That is a very clever way to go around it. That way, it's because it was her decision. Because ultimately, it was her decision to stop driving,
right,
not
right.
I'm taking away your keys because I've decided you can't drive.
Yeah, yes. So,
So
but thank
that's the
goodness
power.
for, like, the driving companies. I can order a car for her, and I thought that would solve the situation with the scammers, but they seem to send her information like she hired a limo service
Oh,
and paid $100 to run errands.
oh.
So, things keep cropping up. When you think you've solved one problem, another one comes up. So I'm learning a lot. I'll say that much.
Yeah, and that's the challenging thing is I've definitely heard from people who've done research into the scammer organizations is once they know some that they can take advantage of somebody, even if they're done with their scam, they pass that person's information off to somebody else and okay, we got them on the investment scam, let's get them on a utility scam or a romance scam, and it just
Right.
changes. We're going to just change our tactics to try to get something else out of them.
Yes. No, even myself, I have been to the doctor recently, and in the last couple of days, I keep getting this text from a laboratory saying, you need to pay your bill. And I'm like, that's kind of odd. So I look up the name of the company, and there's no such company. So, it's not just, the elderly parent, they're after people every day. And even I'll say to people that email me, just research who the email comes from before you respond if you
Yeah.
think something is off. So,
And I get that too. At one point I was taking the scam calls because I was curious about what's the scam, what are they trying to do, how are they working, and life gets busy and I don't have time for that, and I don't want to be doing that, associating that with my personal phone number, and
right,
so I would turn on like iPhone and Android have this ability of if the telephone number's not in the address book, it goes straight to voicemail.
right.
Well, that's great until you need to go see a new doctor or you
Yes.
have someone coming over to your house to do work, and you check the voicemail and it's like, hey, I was waiting outside your front door for 15 minutes, but you didn't answer my phone call, so I left. Like,
Right,
ah,
right. No, it's true.
it definitely
So,
gets challenging. So I super appreciate you coming on the podcast today, and the website is stopelderlyscams.com.
yes,
And I hope you just have some great luck with getting traction and really being able to have an impact in your community.
I
Is there
hope so
any
too.
other parting advice that you have for the audience today?
Parting advice would be, just communicate with your friends and family that, there are a lot of lonely people out there, unfortunately, and just encourage them to get out and do things, go to dinner. Just those little things make a big difference in people's lives, I believe.
I love it, and it helps protect them from that isolation.
Yes, for sure, for sure.
Terry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Chris.